Hey, we're here again with the ReThink podcast and starting out a new series. And we're excited to jump into something new, something fresh. Psalm 23 is where we're going.
That is where we're going.
First, let's talk about...
That's it. We're done.
Before we get into it, let's talk about the resources we're using for groups. We're using Right Now Media.
Yep.
Matt
Chandler, Psalm 23. He breaks it down verse by verse. Each video is around 5 to 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And he just does a good job of highlighting, the low story, high story, and how we fit into that. So
Let's just be real. It's going to be better than anything we put out.
yeah, probably his 5 minutes is better than our 30.
Just call it what it is.
This video is really good.
It is really good.
He's like in New Zealand or something. Like
On a sheep farm.
Yeah,
How
it's-
original is that? I could have come up with
That's
something
Texas,
more creative
man.
than that.
That's not New Zealand. That's Texas.
He's in Texas, the hill country.
there's hills in Texas.
That's the one we're
Yeah, something to
using.
stop the
But we
bullets.
found a lot of other good stuff.
Yeah.
Max Lucado has a Psalm 23 series. It's not really connected to the text, but it's kind of inspirational. That's truth, right?
Yeah.
And then there's
It's a
Tony
low-
Evans,
Low-hanging.
Dr. Tony Evans, that we both watched some of. That,
He's hilarious.
We love him. He's good. Good dealing with the text. Some funny illustrations. Yeah, a lot of opportunities for extra stuff out there.
Mm-hmm.
You could load those up and listen to them on your drives or whatever. We'd really encourage you to. Right Now Media is just loaded with stuff, and if you don't have an account, you need to.
It's free.
Yeah, it's free if you're a part of Christ Church. If you're all over the world watching this, it's not free for you. You got to.
Don't worry. We don't have to worry about that.
No, okay. Does anybody watch this?
Yeah, more than the sermons.
I thought about that. More people watch this because who's going to come in? They come to church, they hear the sermon. They're not going to go home and watch the sermon.
Well, yeah,
Online.
that's true.
But nobody watches this in person. I mean, we look around. There's nobody here. And so,
I don't know if
Even
they-
anybody who's in the room leaves the room when we start. So
But this thing, Psalm 23 is going to take us for 6 weeks, of course, 6 verses, all the way to Easter.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk about Easter real fast before we jump in.
It's coming.
we're gonna celebrate Easter this year
In person?
In person?
in person.
Yeah.
Everybody I think recalls, but we've been at this for about a year with this with the coronavirus, and we canceled Easter service gatherings last year. I would never have believed.
I actually remember us
That would
sitting in
happen.
an office going, "That's never going to happen," and we left. We were like, "Oh, that's happening right now."
Unreal. But
Yeah.
we're going to celebrate it, and we're going to celebrate it big,
Yeah,
right? We're going
4
to have
services
multiple
here.
services everywhere.
4 services here, 3 in Clay
That's
County.
here's Effingham.
Yeah, here's Effingham. That's true.
So Friday night,
7 o'clock,
Saturday night,
7 o'clock,
Sunday,
8:30, 10 o'clock.
8:30, 10. So 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock.
And what are
8:30,
you guys
10.
doing?
we're doing Friday at 7 p.m. and then Sunday morning at 9 and 10:30.
We not expect, that's kind of a bold word. We're thinking potentially 2,500 people for Easter weekend between the two places. I don't know. We'll see. There's still a little bit of hesitancy with people for getting out and gathering in a crowd that large. I probably just scared some people off.
Well, I think come to the earlier one, right? I mean,
The early one.
they're going to be identical services. That's important to mention
They're all
to
the
people
same.
too.
They're all the same. Yeah, we'll see. But it will be the wrap up of Psalm 23,
Yeah.
and then we'll jump from that into we're going to do Colossians after that, which will be the first stuff that we supplement with a little bit of information we're gaining from our trip to Turkey to study the 7 churches and their context and settings and stuff.
What's going to be fun is we're recording podcasts on location in all these places we're going.
Yeah.
And to my knowledge, I could be wrong here, but I looked pretty hard. There's not been a podcast ever recorded in any of those locations.
So we're going to try to record a podcast to complement the letters, right? I don't know why Jesus didn't just do that. But
He kind of did.
yeah, he did.
He wrote it down.
It's a
I got
manuscript.
the transcript of it. We're going to record a podcast at each of the 7 church locations. That's going to be cool.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
I don't want to say awesome yet until we get it done.
Oh, I'm
but
saying it. I'm calling it right now.
It's going to be something.
It's going to be fun.
I was just like today watching video of like a drone flyover of Pergamum. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean-
Laodicea is pretty neat.
Yeah.
course, Ephesus is an
Gosh.
amazing, huge location. So we're going to see a lot of neat stuff there.
Well, Pergamum, I was reading, is the largest theater, was the largest theater in the known world and the steepest theater in the known world as well.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
you can just see that from the
steep.
screen.
Yeah.
And there's no rails or anything. It's
No.
top to bottom.
You imagine-
you fall one rail, you're going 100.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Colossae, we'll go there. That's just a hill, literally.
Like a dirt mound.
Yeah, my grandpa used to have a hill like in his bottom. We called it the Indian Mound because we always found artifacts there.
Really? That's cool.
But exactly what Colossae looks like. So if it doesn't work out on Turkey, we'll go to my grandpa's bottom. We'll go sit on the hill and call it Colossae.
It is
Like
interesting
the
to
third
me
week of
how
April with some turkey calls? Or? Come in.
it's interesting to me how different those, specifically the churches in Revelation, like some of them are really well preserved, really really dug up, and then others are just there's nothing there.
Thyatira is a Roman road and a public building. That's
Yeah.
it.
So you got to understand there's quite a conflict in people in authority in Turkey and biblical history. I mean, they love the tourism dollars, and they're getting that from Ephesus primarily, at least from Bible Times travelers. But it's not like 98.9% Muslim. And so there's not a strong interest in early Christian history.
Yeah.
Right? So they don't necessarily want to uncover some of that. That's a conflict going on, but it's going to be fun times. What I need to say about that also is that we've really experienced a lot of being throttled back on the internet, as far as not as many people are seeing these things that we're putting out without you sharing them. So you have to share. If you see these things and you think, somebody might benefit from that, you have to share it, because social media is throttling us back about 50%, we're guessing, at this point. Just trying to keep, I won't explain what they're doing there. They just don't want that message
Just say it since
necessarily
the
to dominate
middle
for
of
free.
January. It's doing decreasing.
Yeah,
Just
it's
call
the
it what
middle
it
of
is.
January. And they want you to pay for it, which that's business, right? But so if you see this and you like it, share it.
That goes for everything we post on the internet.
Yeah,
Just
share it.
reaches more people.
Let's jump to Psalm 23, guys.
Oh, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're going to have our Hebrew friend in maybe next week to give us some insights into some concepts here that are particularly strong in Jewish nature. But there's tons of stuff for us to talk about. We know we're going to go one verse a week through this whole thing. But I thought today might be good for us just to broad strokes, why this is powerful, the direction it heads. I'm just going to read the whole thing because I think that's strong. That's one of you would like to read it.
Go for it.
I have
Go for
trouble
it.
reading it because it's in NIV,
So
and I
you're-
memorized it in King James Version back in junior high.
I noticed even when you were preaching, when you were saying it off the cuff, you were KJV.
Yeah, it comes out just naturally. My grandma taught it to me, though, so that's okay.
Pretty special.
So Psalm of David. So let's talk about that in a minute. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We've all heard that somewhere. Funerals, gravesides.
Yep.
Powerful words. What I want to do as we go through this series for folks is to take this very simple, powerful message and keep it clean and beautiful, but illuminate the depth in it. That's going to be a tricky thing for us to do, to expand upon what's just simply beautiful and powerful. But hey, we've tried some pretty bold things before. Psalm 23. What do you guys got to say?
Well, I think whenever you look at Psalm 23, obviously it's a psalm of David. So a psalm is a song, a poem to, about, or for, God in particular here. And so it's not a type of literature that is necessarily historical. It's not narrative. It is meant to paint a picture.
It's emotion
Yeah.
eliciting.
And so you start with that and you think about David, and this psalm is really a picture of David's heart. It's a picture of David's relationship with God, because you think about David, like highest of highs, lowest of lows, and called a man after God's own heart. And so this is just like pouring out of a relationship with God. And so the first thing I see in this all throughout Psalm 23 is it's a very personal connection with God. And I say this all the time. Our relationship with Jesus is very personal, but never meant to be private. And that's exactly what this psalm is painting a picture of. Very, very deeply rooted in who David is, even the way he's communicating it. But it's meant to be a public, proclamation of his walk with God.
Yeah, I think when you read it, it's like, this is David's life story on display, but it's not about David. Mm-hmm. He's elevating that story to something higher and using those experiences to point to just the goodness and the greatness of God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in short, it's a psalm of confidence, right? It's not confidence in himself, but confidence in God. You think about the timing of when this was written. He's experienced the highest of highs of God's favor, right? A promise that his descendants will always sit on the throne. And he's writing this in a season when he's fleeing from his son. Mm-hmm. He's trying to kill him. Yeah. And it's just a really cool picture of his confidence in the Lord.
See, I think that the beauty of this is, and it's been used primarily for death, right? The Valley of the Shadow of Death line. Mm-hmm. But it meets us in every season, every experience of life. Because like you just said, David had the highs, higher than we'll ever experience probably, mm-hmm. of power and authority and prosperity. And he had lows, both personally inflicted and things that happened as a result, maybe of his sin, maybe not. Family disintegrations, loss of a child, betrayal. Mm-hmm. To have to run for his life. Mm-hmm. So the high and the low, no matter where you're at, I think these words, they bring you strength and comfort.
What I think is interesting, too, about this psalm is that it's, for whatever reason, I think it's probably what you just mentioned, through the valley of the shadow of death, it's become like almost a culturally acceptable to read in like all over the place. Like you hear it in TV, you hear it in media. It's just interesting that that's the psalm that's been chosen, right?
Well, and I think it's interesting because you have none of this if he's not your shepherd.
Yeah. Yep.
And so we like to be our own shepherd. We like to, follow lots of other different things. But all of this is a result of what he says in the beginning. And I think it's a personal proclamation of David. I didn't used to read it that way. I thought it was more of a generalized statement. I think it's his faith pledge, mm-hmm. or his banner that he's waving. The Lord is my shepherd. And if he's not your shepherd, you get none of the things in the story. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's used publicly a lot.
Yeah.
I think because you hit on something that I think we do a lot with, especially with certain more well-known verses, but we infuse ourselves in the story, and we've talked about that a lot. But when somebody will use that and take that verse 4 out, that I walk through the valley of shadow of death, it's normally like I'm going through hard times, but it's not going to last. But that's not the point of what David's mm-hmm. referring to. It's like, because you got to go further in it and read into the context. Even when I'm in the lowest of valleys, you are with me, and it's this: God is our sustainer, not God is going to, if I trust in him, he's going to make things right or going to bring me out of this hard times, but he's in it with me. Mm-hmm. And I think the key in that is he is there, not how can I infuse myself in this and justify the way I feel, because, man, when we pull it out, that's what we do.
So when you start there in verse 1, it says, the Lord. Lord there is the covenant name of God. So Jehovah Jireh, Adonai, Elohim, that's Yahweh. Jews won't even fully
say it.
pronounce that
Yeah.
name. And it's the idea of God will provide, and it's also a picture of a God with unlimited resource.
Right.
And so he doesn't have to, go and muster up courage or muster up this blessing or anything else. He is the one who created all things, sustains all things. He is the Lord of all creation.
And that's who is your shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two things there that I want to kind of pick apart for a few minutes. That first one is that David knew what a shepherd was because he had been a shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
So a shepherd is responsible for the protection and provision for the sheep, right? The sheep are stupid,
Dumb, dirty, and defenseless.
which is her.
Dumb,
our word
dirty, and
created. In Scripture, that's us.
Those
right?
are my 3 Ds.
Dumb, dirty, and defenseless. And
They are.
but David knew what it was to be a shepherd, and so he knows what it takes to be a good shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows that the Lord is that. He's the provider, the protector of the sheep. And so he sets us up with that. But that word Lord, Tony Evans, when I was listening to him on the Right Now media, he talked about that Yahweh leading his thoughts back to Exodus chapter 3, when Moses, who has fled Egypt, and the Israelites are in slavery in that storyline at that point. He fled Egypt after he killed an Egyptian, and he's wandered around the desert for 40 years as a shepherd. Kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bush that's burning, but not being consumed by the fire, you remember. God speaks to him from the bush and says, I want you to go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And Moses has all kinds of reasons why that shouldn't be, why he can't be the person that does that. But ultimately, he says of God, well, if I go, who am I going to tell him has sent me? By what authority am I coming? And he says, tell him, I am has sent you. That's the name, the Lord, Yahweh. I am has sent you. And it carries, as Tony Evans mentioned, some connotations that, first of all, he has no, he's eternal,
Mm-hmm.
right? He has no yesterday, no tomorrow. He's just present tense. In fact, when Jesus is being questioned by the Pharisees, and they say, well, who are you? He's doing all kinds of powerful teaching, and he's done some miracles. And he says to them, before Abraham was, I am. And even in proper English, Tony Evans mentions this. Mm-hmm. It'd be to say, before Abraham was, I was. Mm-hmm. But he says, I am. And it's I'm Yahweh. I'm God. And so that's what ticked him off there, because Jesus is claiming to be God. So God is eternal. Then he is self-sufficient. He doesn't need any help.
He doesn't have, bad days.
Right. He's consistent.
He didn't wake up on the wrong side of the bed.
He's God. He is I am. Always today, always present, always now as our shepherd. Mm-hmm. So he has unlimited resource, unlimited ability. He's eternal, and he is the one who leads us. And if we have a relationship personally with him, then the text says we shall lack nothing. Lack nothing.
I think
because he is everything.
Yeah, I think in our world, though, there's this, every single day there's a fight over who we're going to follow and which, vein we're going to, get in and go after. And really, David's proclaiming here, there's all kinds of distractions. Because you're right, he's fleeing from his own son when he's writing this. You talk about a messed up, jacked up family. And the thing is, he's writing this going, God, I still trust you in the midst of this because I know who you are.
And that's when he, I know we're going first at a time, but that's literally where he goes right after this.
Mm-hmm.
He leads me.
Yeah.
And, it's a picture of putting yourself under the lordship of Christ, knowing he is my good shepherd, and I shall not want, I shall follow him, right?
So you think about this too. David is anointed king while he's out. He's out tending the sheep, Samuel's like, "Hey, Jesse, you got any other boys? Because the ones you brought to me aren't the
working.
one."
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got David out there, the youngest.
Anybody else picked last at recess?
Right. That's
Right,
that's
right.
That's the
David.
picture.
So he goes from shepherd to king, but even in the midst of that, Saul, right? He gains fame and national like status as a warrior in Israel. Saul tries to kill him. He still doesn't take the king position until like God provides that.
Oh yeah, that story
opportunity.
of En-Gedi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where
Cave
he
of
cuts-
Adullam.
Cuts,
Yep.
off, yeah, cuts off the corner.
Like
of
he
his throat.
could have killed Saul there and
I know.
claimed his.
Right
Like,
there in that
But
moment.
given
he
position.
says, "I will not take the Lord's anointed."
That's exactly right.
Basically, he's put himself in submission under Yahweh.
Yeah. And so that's the pattern you see in David's life. So when he's saying this, like, that's why I say the highest highs, lowest of lows, because he's in a low, as he's going through this, but he's remembering. And I think that's a really good picture for us
Well-
to remember the gospel truths,
Yeah.
to be reminded of who God is in the is on a daily basis.
Yeah.
He's not a God of did this, or he will someday. He is now in our lives. He is present in our lives right now.
And when it says, the Lord is my shepherd, anybody else around the table do way too much research on a shepherd
Oh,
and
yeah.
a relationship. Like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
am hours deep on the YouTube search. But, like, just learning about how the way the shepherd leads his flock.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's never from the behind. It's never from behind like cattle. It's always in front.
Yep.
And it's the relationship between a shepherd and his sheep is a really interesting one because without the shepherd, the sheep are dead.
John 10.
Yeah.
Yep.
The shepherd knows his sheep, Jesus says, the good shepherd.
Yep.
And the sheep know the voice of the shepherd.
Yep.
There's a relationship.
There was a-
that my is maybe as significant as any word in that first verse. My shepherd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, because yes, I'm
Are
deep
you as
in,
well?
in shepherd.
I found out though in your
Stuff
home,
as well.
if you want your kids and family to leave you alone, you just watch YouTube videos about Jewish shepherds, and they all just they leave you alone. Anyway,
It was
go
weird you brought a staff into work today.
Yeah, well.
But no, there was actually, ironically, an article that there was a sheep that had wandered off from his flock and was found this week. I think it was away
Barak.
for
I saw that.
a year. Or, it was
And
a
it was
long
just
time.
like
It was
to gain
enormous.
85 kilograms
Yep.
of
You watched that
wool.
video too?
Yeah.
I watched it.
Enough
We
for-
must all be
enough,
searching the same thing.
enough for 27
guys-
men's suits to be made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's for free.
But that's what a perfect illustration of one, the need for the sheep to be led, because clearly there was nothing that sheep could do to remedy a situation. I mean, you're talking the thing can barely move, so because it can barely move, it's not eating. I mean, you're talking unhealthy. And I was thinking as
Living in
I saw
caves.
that article, it's like, man, what a picture of the reason why sheep need a shepherd, why we need a shepherd. And I mean, if you're not following Christ, that's where you're at. You may be able to live, so to speak. I mean,
Exist.
that thing existed, but it
it was
wasn't
not
living.
living.
It is so hard not to get into verse 2 right now, but go ahead.
Stay away.
I'm ready.
Listen to Isaiah 9. All we like sheep have gone astray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
The other-
all of us.
So I learned this too. I learned lots of sheep story. I talked to some shepherds.
Remember in New Zealand?
You did.
I
yeah.
did.
This,
And,
if you're
we
gonna
went
tell,
watched-
I'm not going to tell
if you're
the
gonna
story.
tell the story, I'm gonna pass out.
No, I'm not going to tell the story. It's a great story,
Of
but
how the male sheep became a female
Oh.
anyway,
I'm getting
sheep.
dizzy.
Shearing gone bad.
shearing sheep is a really important part of a sheep's life because they're not meant to just hold that on, and through breeding and everything, they don't shed their own. That's why that Barak was so nasty. But sheep that are being sheared, like there's good sheep and there's bad sheep. And bad sheep, I learned, when they're getting sheared, they actually make their neck really stiff and push away
And that's what this one did.
from the shepherd.
You-
And you have to pull them back in. No one's listening to me right now.
I am.
Okay.
You have to pull them back in.
You
You
got
have
your
to
whole
pull
audience
them back in
just
to
Googling.
keep shearing them.
Yeah.
And so whenever Jesus talks about like you stiff-necked people, he's referring to this idea of them being sheep, but like you're not doing what a good sheep does. So there's a good shepherd, and there's also good sheep.
Wow.
So look at this one. This is from when we were
Yeah,
in
yeah.
New Zealand.
Yep.
We went to a.
That dude was amazing.
So he's got this sheep laying on its back, and it basically,
You'll have to like put this in or something.
yeah, we could do that. We could do that.
We could do that.
We,
Well,
we
he
could do
says we
anything.
can.
Yeah, he says.
Oh yeah, no problem.
The sheep
Whatever you
has
say, shepherd.
totally submitted itself.
Yes.
Totally submitted to. And it's hardly. It's just kind of like, it feels good.
Yep.
You know. Look at him.
He does. Yeah,
like,
that's
"Oh,
we're gonna have to isolate that clip right there.
Awesome.
So here's the idea, though, is like even if we're part of the flock, right? Like we can still resist the shepherd, but God's not going to leave us alone. Like He's going to pull us back in because He knows what's best for us, and so He's going to keep pulling on us to get us back where we need to be, and that's the choice that we have to make. Is like, are we going to submit our lives to Jesus? Are we going to submit ourselves to the Lord? Because you don't get that second part without the first part.
Yeah.
Without Him
That's
really
the-
being
that's
our
the key
shepherd.
to this. You know, you can go all the way back to the garden and the sin of Adam and Eve and the temptation that the devil puts out there is God doesn't want you to be like him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he wants you to be your own shepherd. That's what they're accepting this. We're going to resist his leading in our life, and we're going to lead ourselves and make our own choice. And that's the essence of about every sin that we participate in.
Well, the again, the research between shepherd and sheep. I was reading about how sheep are herd animals. You know, one makes a break, and then they all go.
Yep.
And I think that's me in some seasons of life. It's just sometimes easier to go with the crowd, and this is not going with the crowd. This is following your shepherd, following the Lord.
Yep.
So
A lot of good stuff here. I think that's enough for today, right?
Sure.
He's
I got
my
one
shepherd.
really good thing, but I'm going to hold out till
I shall not be in.
I know what
shall
it
not
is.
be in
you
want.
do, and if you use it, I don't care because
It's in. Yeah.
it's not going to be on the internet. So.
All right. Hey, we're just getting started. Thanks for joining us on the ReThink podcast, and we'll plow on through Psalm 23 in the next few weeks.
Lead you through Psalm 23.
We'll lead you through Psalm 23. You good sheeples.